So in my continuing effort to respond to the questions of my audience, one of you had raised the question of what's the deal with executive privilege? I mean, after all, we've heard Steve Bannon and some of these other people throwing this term around left and right. Well, now I'm going to tell you all about it. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So executive privilege, what exactly is the idea? Well, the idea of privilege means that you can have certain conversations that are secret and can't necessarily be revealed in court. The most prominent of those privileges, of course, is the attorney-client privilege, which is the fundamental one we have here in the United States. We hear a lot about other kinds of privileges, by the way. Things like, say, clergy-penitent relationship or journalist with their source. And the reality is, none of those actually are legally recognized privileges here in the United States. Basically, you've got the attorney-client privilege and really not much else. Now, within the context of the attorney-client privilege, there's this idea that comes up about work product, which means that as attorneys are working on a certain case, we might draft certain kinds of documents that are for discussion between attorneys or for presentation for our clients for their response and that type of thing. And they're not finalized, but they're part of the product that we attorneys are working on to ultimately get to the point that we're able to file something with the court. If there is something like that that's not finalized, that also is protected by the privilege. Now, that theory was taken another step then with the idea of executive privilege. And what that specifically refers to is while an administration is in office, they need to be able to honestly discuss different ideas, different approaches to dealing with problems. The president wants to be able to get the broadest set of opinions so that he or she ultimately is able to choose between the different opinions and pick the best one for the country. Now, the concern is that if some of these deliberations get out to the public and the public gets to see some of the ideas that were discussed internally, then that might make it harder for the president to be able to solicit the honest opinions of his or her advisors. They might find themselves self-censoring what they're going to say for fear that what they say might be interpreted negatively by people when they see it outside of the internal deliberations of the White House. Now, in the past, this privilege has been very narrowly interpreted, specifically to address the internal discussions of White House staff while they're working for the White House, while the administration is in office. This idea, however, has been taken to an extreme by the Trump administration, of course, because you've got Donald Trump, who's no longer in office, trying to ban the release of certain information from his time in office under the claim of executive privilege. And what's even more unbelievable is that it's been used by Donald Trump and some of his staff, such as Steve Bannon, to assert that they should not be forced to testify about what they witnessed. Now, the irony is that at the time that they're being told they're not supposed to testify about what they witnessed, they were not government employees, which means that they can't be covered by executive privilege, despite the fact that executive privilege is pretty clearly inapplicable in these circumstances, and courts have pretty consistently ruled that that's the case. Donald Trump and some of his allies continue to claim that it's a basis for them not to be forced to testify about what happened on January 6th, for example. And these ongoing claims just show how weak the defenses are that Donald Trump and his allies have. There's really no basis for them to be claiming that they should not be forced to testify, for example, before the January 6th Commission. And where courts are considering prosecutions of various participants in the January 6th insurrection, there's really no basis for these individuals to claim that they're covered by executive privilege and so cannot be forced to testify in those trials. And yeah, I think it's really telling that Steve Bannon, when he was facing charges for contempt of Congress, really didn't bother to mount a defense. He called no witnesses, and his attorneys only cross-examined the two witnesses that were called by the prosecution. The prosecution, of course, didn't need to call very many witnesses because, of course, the standard for contempt of Congress is pretty low. I mean, Bannon received a subpoena that said he needed to testify, and he refused to. That's about all that matters. Right there, you've proven contempt of Congress. So as it turns out, these claims of executive privilege were really not any kind of serious legal argument. They're just in the nature of a political argument to try to give Trump supporters some type of vacuous argument that they can hang on to. As you can see, it's not anything that would actually hold any water in court. But this idea of making these political claims and using them as a basis to stall court proceedings has worked out pretty well for Donald Trump and his allies, actually. After all, they continually hope that by stalling, hopefully they'll get past the next election, and they're hoping that the Republicans will take control of the House of Representatives, which then would probably put an end to the January 6th commission anyway. As a result, they view time is on their side. And the only hope that we Democrats have of actually enforcing the law is to make sure that in this next election, the Republicans don't take over, so that we can continue to proceed to protect American democracy from the assault that the MAGA crowd has made against it. Well, if you want to see more about the assaults that the MAGA crowd has made against American democracy, why don't you check out this other video over here. As it turns out, a lot of businesses, despite claims on January 6th that they were not going to back the MAGA supporters in Congress, they've kind of backed off from that and have been giving money to the people who helped undermine democracy. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.